All right. So this is going to be a really, I think, cool conversation. So welcome, Alex. Thank you for being willing to share your story.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, you are 3 months postpartum and you're actually nursing little Avery right now below the screen. So we're keeping it real right now. Good for you
Yes.
for making it work. I read your story and you did the which session of the push prep course did you do?
I guess it was in January, February.
January, yeah, and we are now June. So you now have a 3 month old. And I was reading your story about having a heart condition. And it
Yes.
obviously really resonated with me because I was born with a heart condition and it really got worse in my first pregnancy. And I know I think we had different heart stuff going on, but you mentioned so much about sort of like needing to advocate and even like you had these leads on and for people who don't know they're basically like the suction cups and the wires attached to them and it feels like you're sort of it can impact your movement, right? And you're advocating to have it not interfere with the golden hour and all this stuff. And I was just like struck by that. So, I'm not going to tell your story for you, obviously. So, I'd love you to dive in and just tell us a little bit about how your birth went.
Yeah. So I was also born with a heart defect. It's called a bicuspid aortic valve. I did not know about it until I was 23, which seems crazy now because I'm the fourth generation
Mm,
that we know of who has this. And it is actually more common in men, but it runs through women in my family. So my great grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, and I all have this condition. Um, and honestly, it is a condition that really mostly needs monitoring, especially at this stage of life. So I never considered how it might impact pregnancy or birth until I had a routine cardiologist appointment and I thought, it was just kind of a bit of information I'd give that my husband and I were planning to start to try to conceive. And it actually started kind of like a cascade of appointments and
mhm.
worries and just so much that I didn't consider I would ever kind of deal with going into this stage of my life. Um, she's trying to make an appearance.
So cute, so cute. Hi, Avery. Yeah, it's one of those things that for people who don't know, your blood volume increases by 50% in pregnancy. So your heart
Right,
has to work harder, right?
right.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and so one of the kind of consequences of this difference in my valve is that I have a small aneurysm in my aorta. So the concern was that as my blood volume increased in pregnancy and as I went through labor and delivery and my blood pressure increased and I had all this pressure, that any of that could negatively impact my aneurysm, causing it to grow. Um, so I ended up being very closely monitored through pregnancy. And my birth, it necessitated a very medical birth, which really made me concerned that it really wouldn't feel like my birth and that I wouldn't get any say or any control over my labor and delivery. And I think because I was able to arm myself with so much information through the push prep course, I knew what was still on the table and it ended up being a lot. And I had a really positive experience, but I don't know that I would have really known what I could have asked for, what I could have advocated for, if I hadn't gotten that information beforehand.
yeah, to feel sort of like very and understandably like there knowing the difference between the things you can and cannot control. And we really can't control a lot, but
Right.
we can definitely find our voice. Now, did you ever feel like it was hard in your birth? And maybe you can tell us a little bit how it all went down.
Yeah. Well, part of the deal with my medical team was that I ideally would not go beyond my due date. And so if I did, I would be induced. So part of what I advocated for, they really wanted to induce me the day before. And I was determined to go into labor on my own. And I said, no, 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 push it out, push it at least to my due date, if not the day after. Let me try. Let me try to see if this baby and I can work together and get this going on our own. So I was doing all the things. I was curb walking, spicy food, pineapple, whatever I could find that might work, the mile circuit, really putting my all into it. And I ended up having a non-stress test the day before uh, my due date, because I was having them weekly to check in on the baby and also my heart. And I was having contractions that I couldn't feel
Oh, interesting. This was right before your due date, like the day
the
before.
day before my due date. Yes.
Hi.
So they said, I think we're going to move you upstairs. And I said, upstairs, like to labor and delivery? And they said, yeah, 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 but just to monitor you for a little while. And that was Valentine's Day. My husband was really hoping that we wouldn't have a holiday baby.
Mhm.
And so he's listening to them say just monitoring, and he's really hopeful that it's just monitoring, but I knew where we were headed.
Mhm.
Um, so at around 12:30, they started the induction process to get it going. Something that I was really fearful of, I think, just because it felt like
Yeah.
more medical intervention.
Yeah.
And I felt like if I could just get labor going on my own, that would be another piece that could be mine.
Yep.
Um, and so, yeah, it makes me even emotional, like how kind of distraught I was when they first told me you're going to go upstairs, because I knew I was getting induced. Um, but it really, it all went really well.
That's
It all went
good.
really well. She did well. I didn't know she was a she then.
Oh, okay.
Um, but like I was so nervous that it would be distressing for her, that, if I was induced, it meant my body wasn't ready.
Mhm, mhm.
Just kind of all these fears surrounding it.
Yeah. So was
Um,
it Pitocin right away? Did they do a Foley bulb? Like
Fully first.
Foley. Okay, Foley. So that's they were dilating mechanical dilation before the actual IV. Okay.
Yes. So they did um, the Foley first, and they started Pitocin about an hour later.
Mhm.
And it was really interesting. They did um, when they did the Foley bulb, I kind of immediately started having contractions, and I was like, wow, this is really happening right now immediately. Okay. So, I'm rocking, I'm breathing, my husband's there. We're like, wow, it's happening.
On
Labor.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah, it's time to go. And then they started the Pitocin and everything stopped.
Interesting.
It was so bizarre, not at all what we had imagined.
Hmm.
Not, I heard, oh, Pitocin, there's nothing worse than
Yeah.
Pitocin contractions. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, it's gonna make everything go from bad to worse so fast. And instead it just stopped everything in its tracks. And so I kind of, at first I thought, okay, well, now this is my time. I should rest.
Hmm.
I'm like, close the blinds, calming music. I'm gonna just rest. I'm gonna see what happens. It's not my personality to really rest. So like 2 hours later, one episode of New Girl that I had been able to get through, and I was like, open the shades. We're moving.
You
So
don't
then,
really know what you want sometimes until you're in
yeah,
it either, right? Like others,
totally.
like, shut up. I was like, don't talk to me. I want no noise. Like music would have been so irritating, but you don't necessarily know until yeah,
No.
you're feeling
So then
it.
we opened all the shades, and I asked for a birth ball. Um, and that was another piece that I discussed with my team beforehand. They had told me that an epidural was really medically necessary to reduce my blood pressure and to minimize the risk of growing that aneurysm. during labor and delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a consultation with anesthesia before birth where we discussed when
Okay.
the epidural would be placed. And we kind of were able to meet in the middle. I think my medical team would have been really happy if I kind of walked in and got an epidural and just labored in the hospital bed. And I was really not wanting that. Um, so we went to 5 centimeters. And I think
Oh.
that ended up working really well. I was ready at that point. I was ready for a little rest. Um, but I still got a lot of time to move. So I spent time on the birth ball, being on all fours felt really natural. I had a lot of counter pressure from my husband. That was also
Amazing.
really helpful. Um, so that was the one thing that was discussed. And then the other thing that you may have alluded to earlier in our conversation was golden hour.
Mm-hmm.
Was so important to me. I knew that I wanted to try to breastfeed our child and that I wanted that time with her. And when they told me during that kind of consultation appointment that I was going to be on EKG leads for the entire labor process,
Mm-hmm.
I was very concerned about one, how that would limit my movement during labor and delivery, and two, how that could impact my baby being placed on my chest and
Of
having
course.
an opportunity to nurse. So all of my leads, and I actually sent you a photo of when they placed her on my chest. You can see that my leads were kind of close to my shoulders, as far out as they could place them, so there was space for her.
I
And
love, oh, as someone who's had a lot of leads and that so terrible sticky stuff that stays on
yeah,
your chest forever and you're like
oh my
scrubbing it
god,
off in the shower.
yes,
From one heart surgery, well, not surgery, but issue person to another, I completely empathize. But
yeah.
just the fact that you were able to speak up, I think anyone listening to this who may be expecting and may be concerned about their ability to speak up, find their voice, advocate for themselves, what would be some advice that you would want to share with them?
I would share with them the same advice that you shared to to us in one of our classes, that your birth is going to be one of the biggest days of your life, but for everyone else in the room, it's Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday. Yeah.
And there were definitely some moments during birth where that was very clear. They're like kind of figuring out whose room they're going to rotate to next. They're having a Tuesday while I'm giving birth to our child. Um, and so I think kind of having that seed planted beforehand,
Mhm.
that really helped me find my voice. How is it really going to impact them if I say this is what I want? So my husband and I kind of laugh about it because um, there was a physician assistant who was present for the birth, and I said to her right when it was time to start pushing, I'd like to try a few positions and see what feels best. And I want to try breathing a few different ways. And I said, there are a few techniques that I learned in a class. And she said to one of the nurses, she said, oh, she took a class.
Oh, like eye roll. You just did an eye
Yes, like,
roll.
oh God, another one of these who took a class. But it was so helpful. Like, maybe she did roll her eyes, whatever. Maybe it is a little bit harder for her if I want to have my legs up on a squat bar, do tug of war, have the towel under my tailbone, um, all that stuff. But I did it. That looked a lot like what I wanted.
Yep. Yeah.
Probably
Oh, the
probably
eye
less
roll.
like what she wanted, but who cares? For her, it's Tuesday.
I love that. And I'm literally like, I have shivers because we're so conditioned, aren't we, to just, especially in a situation where we're told that we're high risk or we are high
Yes.
risk. And it's just sort of like, I think a lot of people would probably just sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Submit. And, like just say, okay, I'm gonna,
Right. This
yeah.
is this is what they suggest, and I'm just gonna go with it.
Right. And you're sort of it's a bit of a dance, isn't it, between knowing like it's medically safe for me to have a towel under my sacrum or to try pushing on my side. That's not necessarily going to, be an issue for my baby or my heart condition or, and I loved it in the moment you actually said, like, I would like to try a few things. And you sort of, we talk about in class, like giving them the finger. And I mean the index
Right.
finger, right? The index finger, like, hold on, like, don't
Yes.
bully me right now. I've
Right.
never done this. This is your first baby. You've never done this before. You can't be expected to just, figure it out instantly. You need a couple practice breaths and a couple practice pushes.
Right. It is not, parts of it are so intuitive, um, that you feel like it's almost better if you just shut off your brain
Yep.
and just let your body do it. But yeah, some of it helps to practice. It helps to practice those breaths. It helps to figure out even doing those breaths in different positions. And then it's not the same to practice outside of labor versus inside. So yeah, I tried side lying, and that just it did not feel
Mhm.
right. I tried squatting. I was able to. I had really good feeling in my legs, even with an epidural, which was also something that I discussed with the
Nice.
anesthesiology team. And it's not, you know, it's it's not perfect, so they can't promise, you'd like feeling in your legs but not your abdomen.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
But it did work really well that I was able to try that, um, and just kind of that tug of war
Nice.
really
That's
worked the best for me.
I love it. And
um,
you had a golden hour. You just mentioned that, it basically, the advocating piece is really the story that I'm pulling out of from your story. Like I'm hearing and I'm, you know, especially with the high risk stuff. You mentioned this moment when I asked you that question beforehand of what really stuck with you, what's sticking with you when you look back and you reflect. And you mentioned, that nursing for the first time. Tell me what that was like.
yes, that was one of those moments where, I think during pregnancy, I think it almost felt to me like other people in my life were even more excited than I was to become a mom. And I realized after I became a mom, it's because they understood what it meant. And I couldn't really understand until I met
Mhm.
our daughter. And I think in that hour and nursing her for the first time, that's when I got it. And I
No.
really, and I really felt kind of that overwhelming feeling of love, and having her come straight out of me onto my chest, and just just know that I'm mom and I'm there to provide for her instantly, um, and come to me to nurse. And it was so incredible. And yeah, in that moment, that it all made sense. One of my girlfriends had said, "I can't wait for you to feel that love." And I remember thinking, I feel so much love in my life,
Mhm.
and it's just so different, and it's just so special. And I think that's when I really felt it.
That's awesome. I feel it too. I'm like trying not to cry right now.
Yeah, me too.
I'm like, ah.
We're just looking at each other with unblinking eyes, like, yes.
Ain't that the truth? Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's definitely a hard one to describe.
Yeah,
And I'm grateful that, I also felt that. I also feel for people who struggle and don't necessarily and think there's something wrong because for
right,
some people it can take time to connect with their baby, right? It's a stranger they haven't met yet in some cases.
right.
So yeah, it can go both ways. So I think we were both lucky in that sense of being able to feel that connection right away.
Yeah.
Although for me, it was the latching was I went through the roof. So I'm glad you didn't have that experience. I was like, I literally like can't handle this pain. Birth was no problem. The breastfeeding, I'm out of here. At
Yes.
least with the first. So this is amazing. So what if you could give, and this I'll wrap up with this question. If you could give your pregnant self one piece of advice looking back, what would that be?
Ugh. This is such a hard one because I want to tell my pregnant self just not to worry.
Mhm.
But how can you leading up to this event that is going to change your life, change your body, change your soul, just change everything, right? Like how can you say don't worry about that? Um but I wish I could have really convinced myself that I had it,
Mm.
going through it in every step, even the hardest moments. I felt it was something that I could do and something that that I was capable of, and that's something that I doubted during pregnancy. And I wish I could have just erased that doubt.
Mhm. I mean,
Sometimes I
you
think,
had a heart condition, like high risk aneurysm, like, no big deal. But
yes, yes,
so that's
there
yeah.
were definitely a lot of worries,
Yeah.
but none of them came true. Even the stuff that I really didn't want to happen. I really did not want that induction. I saw that just um being like the first snowflake in a snowball just tumbling toward, like, my greatest fear was an emergency C-section, just from kind of
Hmm.
getting out of control and for things happening kind of faster than my body could manage them.
Hmm.
Um and yeah, I mean, I know that part of it is luck, and I just feel so lucky that
Hmm.
it went the way that it did, and that my daughter and I are both happy and
Doing.
healthy. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, congratulations to you on beautiful baby Avery. She's 3 months old. She's adorable, by the way. I got a little sneak peek on camera. Oh my goodness, little muffin. And thank you for sharing your story, Alex. Just I'm gonna walk away, and I hope listeners do too. With the whole, speak up, find your voice. It's a Tuesday for them. This is your birth. It matters.
This is your day, mama. Let it be how you want it to be.
I love that. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything.